understand, we are not talking about a kind of cognitive awareness of the selfish genetic consequences of what we do. And an awful lot of people don't get that. I mean, it really is important to understand the idea that these are, I almost said unconscious. I don't really mean unconscious, but at least not understood in a biological sense.
Yes.
It's not that males understand, oh, well, the best way for me to maximize my genetic success is so-and-so, and females do it differently. That's not what we're talking about at all. It's about pre-programmed brain mechanisms which, as evolutionary psychologists, you can work out the reason for them, but the people experiencing those emotions, there's no reason at all why they should understand them.
Right, and they don't. I mean, no man ever, when catching his wife in flagrante delicto, sat down and thought, oh, this act jeopardizes my paternity certainty and hence will impair my gene replication in the future. Oh man, that makes me mad. No, they just, it's the one analogy that I draw is to food. Adaptations such as hunger and specific food preferences, when people eat, they're not thinking, oh, I'm articulating the nutritive logic, the evolutionary logic of why I have evolved these specific taste preferences and hunger mechanisms. They just simply get hungry and eat. And so the evolutionary logic that gave the selection pressures that gave rise to these adaptations are not embodied in the adaptation, so to speak.
It's amazing to what a high level this misunderstanding goes. The most glaring example I know is an anthropologist called Marshall Salins, who, when reading about kin selection, in a sort of savage criticism of what was then called sociobiology, and talking about kin selection, 3/4 relatedness, 1/4 relatedness, half relatedness, he said, fractions are a very recent discovery among peoples. Most peoples do not have the concept of the fraction. So, I mean, that is a lamentable misunderstanding of the entire field. You know, I satirize that by saying that snail shells are a beautiful logarithmic spiral, but where does the snail keep its table of logarithms?
Right, yeah, you're right. It's a very pervasive misunderstanding, and it leads also to other kinds of misunderstandings, like, why aren't, men, for example, trying to have sex with every possible woman that they can, or why aren't men lined up at queuing up at sperm banks, wanting to donate? What people don't understand is the nature of selection. That selection is a causal process that occurs in small increments, statistically recurrent over deep time, creating adaptations that exist in the here and now. And the nature of those adaptations is not a general, I'm trying to maximize my gene replication kind of adaptation. They're more specialized adaptations that solve specific problems. Get food, attract mates, fend off rivals, keep warm.
Yes, I mean, the sperm bank is a very good example because as you say, a naive interpretation of Darwinian theory would say, well, men ought to be queuing up to donate sperm. On the contrary, they have to be paid, which to a naive Darwinian would sound ridiculous. But the rule of thumb which in nature works is enjoy sex, because that's what tends to lead to reproduction. Similarly with adoption, I mean, it's at first sight puzzling that people want to adopt other people's children, and sometimes will even pay to adopt a child, whereas the analogy of the cuckoo, if he were a naive Darwinian, would say, well, the couple whose child is being adopted are the ones who are getting all the genetic benefits, and so they're the ones, if anything, who should be doing the paying.
Yes.
But it is amazing how widespread this kind of misunderstanding is.
Yeah. And I think one reason that it's so widespread, at least in the social sciences, is that people are uneducated in the fundamental logic of evolutionary theory and evolutionary biology. I find it astonishing, for example, in my field, that in psychology you can get a bachelor's degree and a PhD in psychology in every university around the country, as far as I know, without ever taking a single course in evolutionary biology.
That is astounding. And when you come to think about it, why do you even need the title evolutionary psychology? Because, you know, all psychology ought to be evolutionary. There ought to be no other kind of psychology.
Right.
Or am I exaggerating?
Yeah, no, not at all. And I believe that at some point in the future, we can simply strike the term evolutionary and call it psychology, because as a colleague of mine, Don Simon, says, there's no such thing as a non-evolutionary psychology, in that there are no other causal processes other than evolutionary ones that are known to create complex adaptations that we see that characterize the human mind.
Yes. Nevertheless, if you look at the sort of traditional branches of psychology, there might be somewhere a need to think evolutionarily is a little bit more important than others. I mean, you mentioned social psychology as an obvious one. What about developmental psychology?
Developmental psychology also has been one of the most resistant and least touched